1. This happened in October 2021, between 2 and 3 a.m. Way out on the eastern plains of Colorado, there is an abandoned church house with a cemetery. My boyfriend and I have the hobby of exploring abandoned places and found this one via public records of the cemetery. Looking for something to do in spirit of it being close to Halloween. It was about an hour's drive on the east on dirt roads, and after a certain point, there was a good portion of completely desolate road, no houses or ranches in any direction. I confirmed this by looking on Google Earth, as I often do when exploring abandoned places. No civilization for miles in each direction. It seemed odd to build a church out this far. When we arrived to the GPS coordinates, the air was so silent, and all you could hear was the distant sound of cattle mooing. Impossible to tell what direction they were in because of the darkness around. The moon dimly illuminated the silhouette of the church building, which more and more closely resembled a house. There was no steeple. It was a small square structure with a pyramid-shaped roof and a short staircase leading up to the entryway that no longer had a door. 2 windows on either side, and narrow windows along the foundation, which indicated the presence of a basement. None of the windows had glass, and we stood and noticed the stillness in the air before walking up the concrete steps. At the top of the steps, we stopped, because directly to our left was another set of steps leading down to the basement, and in front of us was the open square room that I supposed was the main chapel where pews once stood. We shined a flashlight in. This room no longer had a floor. It was bare rafters, with at least 2 feet of space between each one. We couldn't safely walk on that in the dark. In the silence, we started to hear a faint sound of something moving. It was hard to determine where it was coming from. It sounded like a shuffle, as if someone took a few soft steps through the debris-covered floor. I moved my hat away from my ears to hear better. It sounded like it was coming from the basement, but not from the stairs next to us on our left. More like through the basement window down to our right. We stood and listened. Silence. Our senses were heightened, and we didn't dare to move. We had to wait until whatever it was made another sound. Like we were in a standoff. I tried to make my breath as silent as I could. The silence was broken by what was distinctly bipedal footsteps coming from the back right corner of the empty chapel room. As I realized that not only was this room illuminated by our flashlight, and we couldn't see any person, but also that this room did not have a floor for someone to be walking on. Yet the footsteps sounds were distinctly on hard wood. It felt like time froze as we tried to process what was happening. The footsteps were walking in our direction, and not only that, but they had gone from a slow creep to a full-blown sprint. My boyfriend and I were standing pointing a flashlight into an empty room with no floor, as what sounded like an invisible person sprinting directly at us. I turned around and ran without even thinking, almost like I blacked out. We got back in the car and tore down the dirt road. WTF? What the fuck was that? Back and forth in disbelief. What was that? Yo, that was fucked up. Then I realized my beanie had flown off while I was running. I was like, let's pull over for a minute and assess what just happened. So we decided to go back, because we hadn't driven that far away yet. Partially because I wanted my hat back, but also because we wanted to see if someone was messing with us or what. This time we decided to pull the car up to the front of the building and shine the headlights at it, instead of parking off in the road like last time. So we did that, and I could see my hat laying in the dead grass. It made my skin crawl looking at that church, even from the safety of my car. But there was no movement coming from inside at all, and I didn't dare go back in to investigate. I got out and grabbed my hat and felt the most overwhelming sensation of being watched I've ever felt. Not like in a preyed-upon way of being watched, more like a furious I do not want you here type of being watched. We turned around and drove back to town. We never did get to see the cemetery either. It was out back behind the building. I did some research. The church was built in 1926, but the first burial was in 1920. The last service was held in 1971, and the last burial was in 1964. There's no information on the denomination of the church. I had always been open-minded to the existence of paranormal, but have never had something this unexplainable and convincing happen to me. I still don't know what happened that day. We've had people try to dismiss it as being an animal or a homeless person, but this distinctly had 2 steps when it walked, and why would someone choose to camp in a building 10 miles in each direction to the nearest supplies? 2. I live with my girlfriend and our 3 kids. Our house has 2 floors. The second is the rooms, and the first floor is the living room, bathroom, kitchen, and a small hall that is behind our living room. Now, what is happening is I'm a firefighter. That means I work shifts, and I have to work at night. When I'm at home, everything is calm. One day or two, we hear strong noises like beating on something, bags falling out of nowhere. It's rare, but it happens. On the first floor, me and my girlfriend feel a very strong and negative sense from the bathroom and the hallway. I mostly close the bathroom door, and for me that works a bit to feel more at ease. Sometimes I feel that someone is watching my back, at night when everyone is asleep. The feeling is so strong that I turn off the TV and go upstairs. Now, the worst part, most of the activity happens at night when I'm at work. My girlfriend and my kids feel really scared to go into the bathroom on the first floor. They say that they feel watched and a sense of dread. Me and my girlfriend do not talk about this stuff with the kids around, so it's strange that they see the same things. She says that sometimes when she turns around, she sees in the hallway or in the dark a small head, something small, pure black and faceless, that is always watching her. She even says that she saw a reflection of that when she turned the TV off out of nowhere. My older kid has been saying that he sees a black head in the corners watching him, and he never heard us talking about that. One night, the 3 of them woke up, having a nightmare, and at the same time the 3 of them screamed like hell after they woke up, because they said they saw a big shadow in the middle of the room. Me and my girlfriend woke up to the screams, turned on the lights, and saw nothing. They managed to sleep with our presence. The middle one is scared, so much that he pees in the bed instead of going to the bathroom. Last night, I was at work, and as I arrive home, my girlfriend says that she was in our bed with our older kid, and that out of nowhere my girlfriend said that she saw a small shadow jump up to the bed of the older kid. Our older kid saw it too, and she said to her, "See, I told you there was a shadow watching us." That's when she had straight chills, and also told me during the night downstairs that they could hear strong knocking. At 3 a.m., our younger kid screamed in panic, and she said that she saw a black faceless head and some hands in the corner of the stairs that led downstairs. At 7 a.m. she screamed again, saying that the black shadowy head was now on top of her watching, and that the face was a she. My girlfriend said that the head was really common, but was only watching them, and once spotted it goes away. What can it be? What can I do? Thank you. 3. I had some interesting experiences in my youth, and people around me told me a few things. I would like to briefly report on them here and share my ideas. Of course, I'm also interested in yours because a lot of things don't fit together. A bit of information. First, I'm German, over 40, male, atheist, and everything I'm describing allegedly took place in a small town in the early 2000s. It's right on the border with the former East Germany. Grab a drink, stay a while, and listen. A man from the neighborhood told that a small object landed in his garden. A few beings got out and took soil samples. The people he confided in told him to shut the fuck up, or they would come and get him. Unfortunately, I couldn't find out any more information, except that this was in the late 60s or early 70s. All those involved are now deceased. I think they meant the nice people from the asylum. Strange lights were apparently normal in my parents' teenage years. They called dates looking at UFOs. As I said, our village was right on the border with the Eastern Bloc. It's not that unusual for someone to be interested in monitoring the border, whoever it was. My father saw a shining white woman in the stairwell of our apartment in the evening. He wanted to show her my older brother, who was still small at the time, but he couldn't see her. This probably happened in the 80s. There are thousands of reports of these women in white, enough to fill several stadiums with ladies. There are just as many interpretations of what these appearances mean, so I can't really speculate. It is remarkable that not only my father saw the woman, it could be that only he should or could see her. Or he was drunk. I can no longer ask him about this because he died of cancer in 2001. In 1998, my brother and I were driving to my grandparents' house where he lived. From a distance, we saw what we thought was a helicopter hovering over the cemetery in our village. This is close to our destination. As we drove past it, we realized that it was one of those huge triangular UFOs that were often reported in the press in Europe in the 90s. We just drove past it without paying much attention. When we got to our grandparents' house, we got out of the car, and of course it was gone. I've written about this before, elsewhere. Even though the Belgian UFO wave was often reported in the early 90s, these things were also seen all over Europe before and after that. This was my only close encounter. I'd seen one of these objects twice before, but this time it was close enough to throw a stone at it. But of course we didn't. The most interesting thing here was not so much our lack of interest, that's another topic, but rather that this huge object, although it stood directly above the trees and had lights down in its corners, did not illuminate the ground. How does that work? Was it amazing technology that utilizes the features of reality that we can't even guess at? Was it some kind of hologram, a projection into space of our minds, secret American airplanes? Or are we just crazy? Between 1999 and 2000, my father had been suffering from chest pains for days. He dreamed that at night, as he lay in bed, a grey alien entered his bedroom and placed its hand on his chest. He felt better for a while after that. Maybe that's what happened, but it's also possible that he suffered more than he wanted to admit to my mother and us 3 children. It may have been the subconscious desire for help that triggered this visit or this dream. A year later, my mother saw my father's deceased grandparents standing by his bed at night. They cried and said that they had tried but could no longer do anything for him. He was later diagnosed with cancer and died in early 2001. Again, it may be that this was a reality, but there is also the possibility that my father told her about this dream, and that this was part of her version of the dream. Of course, she knew more about his suffering than we children, who are more concerned with ourselves. Then there were a few smaller things that I can't say much about. My brother felt his cat on his bed at night. Then it became clear to him that she should be in our grandparents' house, or a mysterious ball of light that flew through the bedroom. My mother said that when she left our parents' house and moved to another city, that whatever she would do was to stay there. Well, that's all for now. Nothing special has really happened since then, which I think is a shame. As I said, It all seems a bit thrown together and doesn't fit together well. But from all this I conclude that such things happen more often than you think, and that, or many people ignore them, keep quiet about them, explain them away, or dismiss them as unimportant. What has all this done for me in my life and my view of the world? Actually nothing. My family has always been open to everything and doesn't reject anything just because it can't be explained, or is difficult to explain at the moment. There are a lot of things that are difficult to explain and understand. Black holes, how the theory of relativity and quantum theory fit together, exactly how painkillers work, my toddler's thoughts. Maybe we better apes are just not able to see things as they are. What do you think about it? And thank you for your attention. 4. This was way back in 2013. I was in the 5th grade back then. As a child, I was extremely curious about things around me, and when I look back at my childhood, there's one instance where I keep telling myself, I shouldn't have done that. I was back from school, and went to the playground near my building to play football with my friends. It was like a concrete parking space, and there was a small gutter nearby. The season of rainfall had just ended, and the gutter was dry. I accidentally kicked the ball far from the post, and it landed right in the gutter. I went to retrieve the ball, and saw a pile of bones nearby. First I thought it may have been the carcass of a cat or something. I had thrown the ball back, but stayed there, carefully observing what was in front of me. There were Sanskrit letters, carved on the bones along with a few symbols. Some time passed, and now my friends came to find out why I was standing there in the gutter for so long. I directed their attention towards the bones and the letters, and one of my mates shouted, "Get back, and do not touch it!" He shouted so loud I was taken aback for a moment, and as soon as I collected myself I was bombarded with questions. Why? Why are the bones there? What is written on it? Why shouldn't I touch it? He said that the area I lived in Mumbai was known for aghoras, who are supposed to be extreme spiritual practitioners. And there was one sect that practiced tantric stuff or black magic. As soon as I heard this, I couldn't help but laugh. I said the usual stuff. This is such bullshit. There's no such thing as black magic. And then I did it. Watch this. I walked towards it, pick up a bone, and shout, "I don't believe in you. Do your worst." I was met with some cheering from everyone else but him. After this, I walked back home, not thinking about it much. But I would be lying if I said I was not concerned at all. I go to sleep early as it's a school night and think, see, nothing's happened. Around 4 a.m., the phone rings in my parents' room. I was half awoken by the phone, but I didn't care much about it and tried to go back to sleep. I hear a click of lights turning on. "We have to go to Hyderabad right now. Pack your things," my father said, with almost no emotion on his face for me to get a hint of what was going on. I go to my parents' room and see my mother crying, concerned. I ask her, "Amma, what happened?" "Your grandfather had a heart attack. He is no more." For a second, everything went blank. The next moment, only one thing running in my mind. Was it the bones? For the next 4 or 5 hours, I said nothing, was completely silent on the flight journey. In my mind, I am telling myself it can't be. Grandpa was a healthy man for 63 years old. It can't be. We reached my grandparents' house. My mother was barely able to contain her emotions, somehow managing not to cry and at the same time trying to console my aunt. I sat in a corner listening to the family doctor and my father have a conversation. The family doctor said that a week ago he had taken a test to check his blood pressure and cholesterol after the Diwali festival, and all his tests were normal and nothing in the report suggested that he would have had a heart attack. That last sentence convinced the 5th grade me that this all happened because of me. A few months later, I told this only to my mother and no one else. She, being a believer in religious practices, said only one thing. Our deaths are written as soon as we are born. You can't influence or change anything that happens. What has happened is in the past. You loved him and he loved you. That is all you have to remember. This was ages ago, and I keep telling myself that it was a huge coincidence. I'd almost forgotten about this until just a few weeks ago. According to some Hindu traditions, it was an important death anniversary, and I remembered all this. 5. For the past 2 years, me and my spouse have both been hearing each other calling our names. This only happens when one of us is out of the house for an extended period, like a vacation or a few days' travel without the other person. At first I was skeptical. He said he heard my voice shouting from around the kitchen for help, and he was in the bedroom, so he didn't want to go check knowing I was not even in the same state. I pretty much laughed it off thinking it was a trick of the ear, until it happened to me. He was gone for about 3 days. I was in the kitchen and heard, "Baby, help me?" Clear as day in his voice. I was the same way, not checking whatever that was. It recurred many times after that, just his voice shouting while he was off on a trip. It went away after a few months, but last month I was standing in the kitchen again and heard my own voice from the bedroom calling my cats, "Here, kitty cat," like it was mimicking me, trying to get my cats to come into the room. My dog started freaking out and looked into the hallway with fear. I got goosebumps, and I've been trying my best to ignore it. Help me, please. What is this, and why? What do you think it achieves from doing this? I've heard that it's called a mimic from what people have said, and I'll research it further. My church has offered to cleanse my home, and I have declined many times out of fear of what will happen once they leave. This has caused arguments between me and my husband. Because he thinks the sage will make it go away, I think it will absolutely make it furious and will hurt someone. Keys and crosses fly off the wall often, bedroom and kitchen exclusively, and I did not want to add to this post originally because I'm more concerned about the random voices. This has seriously done some detrimental harm to my marriage and mental health due to the arguing about what to do, feeling uncomfortable and whatnot. We can't just up and move right now either. I don't want to piss it off. I don't want to make it uncomfortable. I just want it to go away. I don't know how to make it stop without making everything worse. I'll try reading the Bible out loud and putting more crosses up, along with the security cameras. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 353. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do poke the like button, and if you'd like to get early access to the videos, then you can support me through my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You can do that for as little as $1 or more if you like a month. You'll also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store in the description there, where you can get yourself some caps and t-shirts and mugs and things like that. You can also make donations during streams or videos like this one. And while you don't have to do this, I very much appreciate it, and it has been greatly helping me out. Okay, I think there's no other business for now, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And this one comes thanks to moderator Ashley, and that is, if you didn't have to sleep, what would you do with that time? I would drink tea and go slowly mad because I can barely stand being awake the half of the day that I have to be. I'd probably read. I don't really have enough time to sit down and do pleasure reading. I tend to listen to mostly audiobooks because it's what I have time for, but I do miss actually reading a good book. I have several books on my shelves that I've purchased a while back, years back in some cases. I just haven't had the time to read. So that's what I do. I'd probably read. I look forward to reading your answers in a comment below. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.